My name is Urmas Paet. I am also a member of the European Parliament and here in Guyana for next. It works. So that for next few weeks and a couple of months here in Guyana, I will be the head of the European Union's observation mission. And first, of course, on behalf of our mission, I would like to extend my thanks also to the President of Guyana for inviting the European Union to observe these important elections. Our team and me personally, we have received a warm welcome from all our interlocutors in Guyana, and I sincerely thank them for that. I also would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the European Union member states and Norway for their support to this mission. And our mission is independent. It also means that we are independent from the EU delegation to Guyana, from EU member states and also other EU institutions. But still, of course, I would like to thank EU Ambassador Pons Kantor, he's also here, and his team for their support to our mission. And once again, thank you for Guyana Press for your interest to our mission here in Guyana. Yesterday, I had many meetings, including with the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Secretary General of PNCR, the leader of the opposition, and I will have meetings also with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, and representatives of the Citizenship Initiative and the Liberty and Justice Party later today. The presence of the European Union Election Observation Mission demonstrates the European Union's commitment to the conduct of inclusive, transparent and credible elections in Guyana. We focus our observation not only on election day, but on the entire electoral process, including the campaign, the results tabulation, and the resolution of any election-related dispute after voting has finished. And now, let me also give you some details about our mission. This is the first time that the EU has deployed a fully fledged election observation mission to Guyana. The mission is currently composed of a core team of 9 election experts who arrived in Georgetown on 25th of January, as well as 14 experienced long-term observers who were deployed on 4th of February across the 10 regions of Guyana to observe electoral preparations and the campaign. As I am speaking to you, our long-term observers are meeting with election officials, candidates and representatives of civil society. They will report their observations back to the core team in Georgetown, and these will contribute to the mission's informed and impartial assessment of the electoral process. Shortly before the election day, the mission will be reinforced by 20 short-term observers who will observe voting, counting and the tabulation of results. On election day, the mission will be joined by some locally recruited short-term observers from EU member states, diplomatic missions accredited to Guyana. And this will bring the total number of EU observers to more than 50. The mission is independent in its findings and conclusions, and EU observers adhere to a strict code of conduct of international observers that requires they maintain strict neutrality and impartiality in the course of their work and do not interfere in the electoral process. However, we do hope that our presence will have a positive effect on reinforcing confidence in the process and that it will help to deter any potential fraud, intimidation and violence. We are here to observe if the electoral process was conducted in a transparent and credible manner. We will assess the extent to which the elections are in compliance with the laws of Guyana as well as with international and regional commitments for democratic elections to which Guyana is a signatory. These include the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, the Convention Against Corruption, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, among others. In the run-up to election day, the mission will assess the legal framework, the voter and candidate registration, the campaign environment, the election preparations, and the role of civil society. We will also assess the work of the media, including the social media. On election day, we will observe the opening of polling stations, the voting process, the counting of votes, the tabulation of results, and any election complaints and appeals that arise on or after election day. On 4th of March, we will issue a preliminary statement giving our initial assessment of the electoral process up until that point. We call it preliminary because the electoral process will most probably be far from over, and therefore it will not be possible to give a final, definitive assessment of the whole process. A more comprehensive final report will be issued 2 or 3 months later, after the completion of the electoral process. And this will also include recommendations for future elections. To conclude, the European Union attaches great significance to these elections. We stand ready to deliver an impartial, objective assessment of the electoral process and call on all stakeholders to respect the rules and refrain from inflammatory language and violence. We will make an assessment of the entire process, which means that we will also assess the neutrality and independence of the judiciary and the election administration, as well as the transparency of election operations, including the tabulation and publication of results. As impartial election observers, we don't care who wins. We care about how they win. I see these elections as an opportunity for stakeholders to demonstrate Guyana's commitment to democracy by conducting a credible, transparent, and inclusive elections. This means ensuring that all reliable voters and candidates from any community across Guyana can fully exercise their democratic rights. All contesting political parties should be free to campaign and to inform voters of their programs on a level playing field with equal access to the media and to public spaces. Voters should be able to cast their vote in secret for political parties of their choice, free from pressure, intimidation, or any other kind of interference. So we encourage full transparency and accountability of all the stakeholders involved in the elections, as this can further enhance public trust and confidence in the electoral process. We also encourage a transparent and timely tabulation and announcement of the results. So thank you very much, and now there is time to switch from the monologue to the dialogue. Questions?
Sir, Dennis Chabral, WRLA, News Talk Radio.
Could you say, sir, why there was a need for a full-fledged mission rather than just a small mission that we had been accustomed to over the years?
2 reasons. First, as I mentioned, we got clear invitation from Guyana, from Guyana's president, which is always the first important step after which European Union will decide if to send an observer mission or not. And second is that if to look at our own working plans and also resources, then it was possible to send full-fledged observer mission, because it's always our preference to try to send out observer mission if we decided to do so.
Just as a reminder, we're going to take 2-3 questions at the same time. the elections process, whether you would be embedded in some way at the elections commission. I'm also interested in your thoughts coming in here. Obviously, the last electoral commission would made some observations, including about the electoral list, which has been controversial already. I wondered if you could comment on that. The last, well, at least 2001, you had recommended an annual update of the electoral list.
If you look what happened in the history and recommendations which were made by also other observers during previous elections, then I guess today's situation is that, of course, not all the proposals have been taken on board or fulfilled 100%. But, well, if you look on the larger scale and the patterns how elections are developing all around the world, then it's the process. So in this sense, I guess that also after upcoming elections here in Guyana, I'm quite sure that yes, we will make certain proposals, certain suggestions for the future also for Guyana, and we hope that they will be useful for development of your country and society. But well, the practice yes is that it will not happen, like this with 100% immediately. It is the process, and in this sense, as I mentioned, we are really interested in, European Union is really interested in supporting all these democratic processes in Guyana, and we see that one of the good options how we can support is also through some recommendations and suggestions what concerns voting process also in the future, because I guess it's also the benefit of all your people here, that they really can trust the processes, that they really can trust that their vote will count and also make the difference.
A follow-up, please. Oh, it's a follow-up.
Samantha Allen, Sabbath News. Sir, could you say whether you have any concerns about what you've seen so far, what is being said on the campaign trail? We've had a recent statement about persons being asked to stay at polling stations. That has seen some criticisms. What is your opinion, and are there any concerns?
Well, pessimists and sometimes even realists, they always say that they have concerns. So that, well, of course I have concerns, but at the same time, also having yesterday, as I said, meetings with your important parties, and we'll continue these meetings also today. Actually, I'm quite, in this sense, confident that my feeling is that the understanding in your society is very high, that the voting process, all this election process in this sense should be free and fair. And as I also said in my initial statement, of course, every person with common sense should understand that violence, for example, is no solution. Not in any case. So that also for your country, for my country, for all countries in the world, I guess that, well, free elections, situation where citizens, where the people can express their will freely without the fear of violence is the best solution. And I'm, well, quite confident that also your political leaders understand this very well.
Sir, before coming to Guyana, did you conduct any preliminary assessment of the electoral process here?
We're working on it, so that, as I said, on the 4th of March, it is actually 2 days after election day, we will come out with our initial report and observation. And, well, real assessment, real document will be out then after a few months after elections, then already with concrete suggestions for Guyana government, for Guyana, about the possible changes we would suggest for the future. But what concerns the present campaign process, present elections, then at this stage we simply collect information, we observe, we make notes for ourselves and we come up with them after election. So that, as I said, EU observation mission is not anyhow intervening into your electoral process, so that our main aim is to make our observation and give then suggestion after the process has been finished to your authorities, so that hopefully they can take them into account for the next elections. So that, as I said, it is actually a step-by-step process that in final end everybody will be very happy with the process of elections.
Let me ask the pointed question. Do you believe that the current voters list as it stands provides at least some basis for a free, fair and credible election?
Well, I see that, well, Guyana is not, how to say, the biggest country in the world and the biggest society. It means that if you have such a cute, small society, it also means that all the processes what you have in your society are much more personal than maybe in larger or bigger societies. And I guess that in this sense, the value of proper elections, the elections without fear, as I said, without the risk for violence, has also special value for society and country as yours. So that in this sense, my personal, rather strong understanding is that all this, well, really negative side of I would say what may happen in final end will not realize. Because I guess also your society has your own lessons learned.
No, I was asking specifically about the voters list, if you believe it forms the basis for at least a starting point for a free, fair and credible election.
I am not more, in this sense, clever than your own authorities in this regard and your electoral committee. And as I said, the final assessment, our assessment, we will tell you not before the 4th of March. Because as you understand, any comments on this may also be taken as interference into the electoral process.
One more incident news, sir, you listed some agencies and officials that...
The micro will be immediately there.
Yeah, you've listed some officials and agencies that you've engaged. Any other officials or agencies on the list to be engaged? And what are you trying to fact-find in those engagements?
Yeah, well, there are actually a lot of interlocutors and partners with whom we communicate. So that, yes, as I said, we'll meet all the, well, your important parties here, with authorities, with foreign minister, also with colleagues from Carter Foundation mission and so on. But our team, which is this time quite large, here in Georgetown, but also in the regions, well, they do it now every day. They meet with, as I said, with candidates from different party lists. They meet with authorities, they meet with civil society, they meet also with press representatives and so on to get overall picture what exactly is the situation now before elections, which are the trends, and then of course the election day and what's going to happen after election day. So that we really like to present our findings and assessment on the very deep and large basis, so that it's not just a few emotions, no. It is very deep-rooted work on the basis with a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings with very different representatives of your society from very different fields.
Sorry, I had asked earlier whether you would have observers stationed at GCOM, its command center, and if yes, what in particular would you be interested in observing?
No. Permanently, of course, we will not have our representative in GCOM, but we have with them very good working contacts. Of course, we ask questions, we share information, we analyze what also they are doing. but it does not mean that permanently somebody is sitting there. So what else? Please, here on second row.
Good morning, Niall Jordan from the Citizenship Initiative Party. The last time you were in Guyana was in 2001, 19 years and 3 elections have passed since. You've missed 3. I'd like to ask why, and also why this one is so special that you're here now.
Every election is very special because every election can make difference, as you know very well as politician. But I explained why we this time here with bigger forces. One is very clear invitation from Guyana's authorities, and for us it's also important that we should feel and understand that this country who invites our observation mission, they really care about what we're going to tell them. They really care and interested in the suggestions and proposals for the future, so that in this sense they'd like to, well, improve. Because it is quite costly mission as well. And then we also like to spend European taxpayers' money only if we're confident that our partner, in this case Guyana, is in fact really interested, what our comments and suggestions will be. This is first. And second, as I said, if we make our working plans, then for this year it was also clearly available what concerns financial and human resources.
So to be clear, you were invited for 2001, but weren't invited for the other 3 that passed.
I'm not, how to say, so well aware what happened in past. For me, it's important what happens now, that Guyana and Guyana's election process is on the right track. And we'd like to assist in this sense that your elections now and in the future are as open, as democratic as possible. That's it. This is what matters for me. What else?
Yes, so
Yeah.
quickly for the benefit of our readers and listeners and viewers, in a nutshell, what are some of the key things that your mission will be looking for to conclude whether the elections were free and fair?
Yeah, as most probably you know, there are actually a lot of elements, and there is quite deep and comprehensive methodology what participants of observation mission have to follow. But well, it's clear that the most important elements always are voters free to make their decision whom to support? What is the environment of overall freedom of speech? In this sense, is press free? Have all political parties adequate possibilities to be represented in media, in press? Are parties free to organize their campaign events without interference of powers, for example? Do voters feel themselves secure, however they will vote or whom they will support? Are polling stations accessible so that people really can go there and express their free decision, free will? So that these are actually the main elements on the basis of what the conclusions will be made. But of course, as I said, this methodology is very deep and comprehensive. There are a lot of details, but the most important is, with one sentence, can every voter express her or his will freely, without any interference, without any fear? This is the most important.